So it's happening. Um, I guess this shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone except for people who, well, either were for this bill to begin with or just have no understanding of authoritarianism. Anyway, so a new Florida bill proposes expanding Don't Say Gay to the workplace because, of course, it is. They started off with the littlest kids thinking, oh, yeah, people are going to be for that because, obviously the littlest kids couldn't possibly know how they feel unless there happened to be cisgender and heterosexual. Somehow those kids know themselves perfectly well, but if you're not that, you don't think you obviously are confused and don't know what you're doing. And so then expanded it to all of high school, which I'm sure some people were like, wait, well, maybe even after puberty they still don't know what they're talking about. And this is coming from someone who hates teenagers. So, yeah. But now they want to expand to the workplace. So I wonder how many people are going to try to pretzel themselves to try to explain how this is a good idea instead of coming to the realization that, yeah, this obviously was not going to stop. And those of us who were aware of what happens when you give an authoritarian a little inch, well, they do this. But anyway, enough rambling. Let's get to the article. Not content to only target transgender students and staff during school hours, a Florida Republican introduced a state bill this week that would effectively expand Governor Ron DeSantis' infamous Don't Say Gay rules to include government workplaces and nonprofits. Now, well, let's continue with the article and then I'll. House Bill 599, introduced on Tuesday by freshman Representative Ryan Chamberlain, makes sweeping changes to Florida's employment statutes to declare that a person's sex is an immutable biological trait, which literally nobody is disputing. The only people who seem to have a problem with this fact are the transphobes. Trans people know what their biological sex is. That's why they're transitioning, you dipshit. The bill would prohibit government employees or contractors from being compelled to use a person's pronouns if those pronouns do not correspond to his or her sex. Okay. What is it with these transphobes assuming that trans people can't pass? I've seen plenty of trans people who, if you didn't know they were trans, you wouldn't guess. Why? Because they look like the gender they feel like that they are. So all you have to do is look up trans influencer YouTubers. Jamie Dodger, Samantha Lux, no offense. I mean, you look at them and you would not know that they were trans. I mean, they make it obvious. They tell you right up front. That's the whole purpose of their channels. But if you just saw their pictures outside of any context, you wouldn't know that they were trans. And these transphobes seem to be convinced. Now, I can understand in high school and definitely elementary school, they're just socially transitioning. So they might have haircuts of the opposite gender of the gender they feel, the opposite sex. They might wear clothes that they're more comfortable in, which is usually worn by the opposite gender, that because rather than their biological sex. I mean, so I can understand that when they're kids, even through the end of high school. Okay, I will give you that. Because that's usually when they start transitioning. Once you turn 18, that's when you can have access to hormones and surgeries. So then it becomes a lot harder, if not downright impossible, to know that a person is the not the sex that they were assigned at birth. Now, they again, everyone transitions at a different time. So if you're in the middle of transitioning as an adult, which most people do, it's becoming more and more acceptable to start transitioning younger, and I mean socially transitioning. But the stuff that requires surgeries and hormones, things that you can't really change back or change back very easily depending on what it is that you've done. That usually starts as an adult. So maybe at that point they haven't transitioned to the point where a person wouldn't know that they're trans. But again, I'm operating under the assumption that transphobes seem to think that trans people can never pass. Okay, if you stayed with me for that rant, the bill would prohibit government employees or contractors from being compelled to use a personal. Okay, I read that one. It would also bar employers from asking any worker to state their own pronouns. Are you kidding me? There are people in this world who are just naturally um that are naturally, oh, I can't think of the word, so I'm just going to say neutral. You can't tell if they're a boy or a girl, man, woman, whatever you want to say. And it's not because they're trans, it's not because of being non-binary, they just naturally look that way. So why so you should be able to ask. I mean, you might get it wrong otherwise. And again, not because the other person isn't the sex they were assigned at birth, that they aren't cis. It's just that, they're not trans. They just, you just can't tell. Because there are just certain people who you just can't tell, and they're cis. Anyway, let's see. Under the proposed law, employees and contractors cannot provide to an employer his or her preferred personal titles or pronouns if, again, they do not match the worker's assigned sex. Which, again, for those who are fully transitioned, how the hell would anyone know? And by fully transitioned, I mean they've made the changes in their paperwork, so the name matches who they are. Um, they the gender listed matches who they are. So and they pass. So how the hell would anyone know that this person is trans? What, are they going to go digging to see what surgeries they had? Are they going to go digging to see if they're on hormones? Seriously, how are they going to discover this? So this law doesn't even do a good job of, I mean, it just is going to target those who either do not pass, or it's going to target, and by do not pass, I'm talking about even cis people who do not pass. It's going to target cis people who do not pass. It's going to target people who are just beginning their transition, um, their medical transition, like I said, just starting hormones. Maybe they they haven't had any surgeries and they want to, or whatever. But those are the people that are getting targeted. The people who are fully transitioned, that you could not look at them and you couldn't tell that they were trans. This is not going to affect them because nobody's going to know unless it's in a town where people knew you from prior to the transition. And you would hope that those people would keep their damn mouths shut. All right. Chamberlain's bill would also ban any tax-exempt nonprofit or employer that receives state funds from requiring any training, instruction, or other activity on sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. What? Okay, so we're a bunch of dicks and we want everyone else to be a bunch of dicks. Okay. Instead, the bill would establish non-discrimination protections for what it calls deeply held biological-based beliefs. Oh my God. I want to scream. I really want to scream right now. A new spin on religious exemptions that are commonplace in other anti-LGBTQ plus bills and conservative talking points. Okay. First off, there is so much wrong with what deeply held biology-based beliefs. Number one, biology isn't faith-based, which they're basically equating biology with. It's a science. And no, just because you have not gotten past elementary school science does not mean that science stopped. Just like any other science, it keeps going. This comes from those people who are like, it's basic biology. No, it's fucking not. Yeah, you're saying what you know is basic biology. That's great. But if all there was to anything was basic biology, if that's the only biology anybody needed to know ever, why is there advanced biology? There would be no need for that, right? Because basic biology covers everything. There's a reason why it's only basic. Because you get the rough understanding of how biology works. That doesn't mean that it's the end-all be-all. Yeah, that's just, that hurts my head so much. Advocates say the bill, if passed, could have dramatic consequences for LGBTQ plus organizations and individuals across Florida. No shit. Writing on Truth Out, independent trans journalist Aaron Reed speculated that the bill could effectively torpedo LGBTQ plus nonprofits and activist programs comparable to Russian law that outlaws gay and trans propaganda. Yep. Virtually every LGBTQ plus organization would be radically affected by HB 599 and would likely have to shut down, Reed argued, as it would be nearly impossible to continue even basic operations legally. It would be a blatant power grab by the state targeting organizations critical to the government and would further drive LGBTQ plus activism and organizations underground in the state. You know, I've already heard stories about trans people especially, but I think LGBTQ plus to be in general, who are fleeing Florida. They're fleeing Florida because they are that scared about their well-being. I mean, come on. For years, I've been calling Florida a third world country. Now they're saying, oh, you thought we were a third world before? Hold my beer. We'll show you third world. What the fuck? Florida Representative Anna Eskamani, the state's first elected Iranian-American lawmaker, echoed Reed's analysis in a Tuesday post on X, formerly Twitter. HB 599 would basically ban LGBTQ plus advocacy group Equality Florida from existing, Escamani wrote, calling the bill bigoted, unnecessary, and highly unconstitutional. Yeah, well, not like that ever stopped an authoritarian, and based on the composition of the Supreme Court, wouldn't surprise me if they upheld it. The Florida legislature is not currently in session, though lawmakers are still allowed to file bills for consideration next year. Any action on HB 599 will likely take place during the legislature's next regular session, which is scheduled to begin in March 2024. So at least the LGBTQ plus community in Florida has a few months to enjoy some remaining freedom. Since the original Don't Say Gay legislation passed in 2022, God, it's been that long, trans Floridians' lives and their families have been upended, with many finding no choice but to flee the state entirely. But all hasn't been rosy for its main architect either. Representative Joseph Harding was sentenced to 4 months in prison last month after pleading guilty to multiple charges of COVID-19 relief fraud. Oh, and he seemed like such an upstanding guy. Who would have thunk that he was a thief? He probably orchestrated that, so it's like, look over there, don't watch me stealing money. It really would not surprise me at all. So that is all I have for this article. But yeah, it's not looking good for the LGBTQ plus community in Florida or their allies and their families, because I know it's hard to believe, and transphobes refuse to believe this, but not all family members are dicks to their kids for not being cis and straight. Some of them are actually understanding. And it's not because they're horrible people, but because they actually give a shit about their kids, instead of having little mini-me's that look and act just like them. So, yeah. I believe I covered everything I wanted to in this video, but wouldn't surprise me if after we see the government and nonprofits, if they don't try to push it on businesses in general or everyday life and trying to get rid of LGBTQ plus people permanently. That would not surprise me. Now, whether it would, that escalation would pass on constitutional muster, and by that I mean this Supreme Court, I do not know. They did stop a ban on drag, kids going to drag shows, so they're not completely insane. So they might just put a kibosh on this nonsense. But I do not trust the Supreme Court, so let's hope that it doesn't go through. But anyway, with that, I will see you guys in the next video.